Welcome to the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom with Dan Breslin.
Welcome to the REI Diamonds podcast. I'm Dan Breslin, and on these REI Diamond interviews, I bring you the real estate investment community's brightest minds. Today, I'm here with a special guest, Josh Weidman from the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania region. Josh is the founder of Turnkey Philly and Atlas Property Management. A few of the topics that we're going to cover include finding properties off market. We're going to touch on wholesaling. We're going to get into the turnkey rental business, in case you're unfamiliar with that. And we are going to dive deep into the topic of property management, including some systems that you can put in place to manage your own properties even better, or figure out, whether or not or how to find the proper property management company, whether you're located in the Philadelphia area or anywhere around the country. By the time we're finished with this episode, you'll have a much better grasp on the things you need to look out for when choosing property management. So without further ado, here's Josh Weidman. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Dan, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So we always get started with the origination story. We want to know kind of what you were up to before real estate. How did you discover real estate, and how did you get your start?
Wow. It's an interesting story. I first got started, and my interest was peaked in real estate when I was 16. I remember sitting on the couch and watching this guy talk about buying real estate and getting rich in real estate with no money down. I don't know, probably everybody that is about our age, Dan, has seen the Carl Sheets ads on TV, and I think his no money down system probably launched more real estate careers than maybe anybody else in our generation. But that's kind of where it started. I bought the course, and like so many people, I bought it. It got delivered. I looked at it for a week, and it sat in the back of my closet for probably 10 years.
Right.
I know, right? But long story short, I graduated from college. I started selling windows and siding, and I had some success with that. Ended up starting my own company, and that did not work out so well. And, I found myself at, the age of, 27, around and saying, to the point where, I probably should have declared bankruptcy, but I didn't know that I should have done that. Owed a lot of money, didn't. Yeah. You make mistakes as the time goes on, but I realized that real estate was something that really piqued my interest. It's something that I wanted to be involved in, and I said, I might as well take the leap. And I ended up getting into a couple rehab deals, stumbled into wholesaling. On my first wholesale deal, I made $30,000, and I looked around and said, this is something that I can do over and over and over again. Let's keep doing it. And since then, it's really been a whirlwind. A partner and I, we buy homes to fix, which is a wholesale company, and we were doing about 8 to 12 transactions a month, right around 2008, 2009, and built that company. It was going really well, had a lot of overhead, and we were built a rental portfolio at the time, and realized that we're spending all this time on running after these rentals, and it wasn't really making us a ton of money. And so we tried to hire a couple management companies, and that wasn't so successful, and decided to build our own management company, and we built Atlas Property Management. And so, since then, I've been involved in wholesaling and managing properties. I do rehabs, and my latest venture is Turnkey Philly, which is we provide turnkey investments to investors from around the area and around the world. We source properties, do the construction, place tenants, and manage the properties all in one location. And the idea is the investor brings the money, and we do everything else. So that's my 30-second elevator speech there.
Cool. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You were doing window and siding sales. Is that what you were originally doing?
That's right.
Early on?
That's right. I was, that's right, selling windows and siding, and it was kind of exciting because, as a college kid, I did pretty well for myself, right out of school, and I got a college education that hasn't really contributed to my professional career, but I always liked sales. It's interesting and kind of fun and exciting. So
yeah, it's interesting also. So when I got started, I was like in car sales, and I notice, listen, anybody can get started, and it doesn't really matter, I guess, what your background is, but I know that my personal story, and I guess you would agree with me, that the sales experience, like understanding that sales is a science and understanding the people and the psychology and the things that come along with becoming a good salesman has given me a foundation which allowed me to quickly succeed, on the first wholesale deal and then subsequently kind of building a business around that. I mean, would you agree with me on that statement?
100%. I mean, there's so many things that you learn in sales. Things as simple as interacting with people, and how to talk to people, how to be comfortable, how to relate to them, and also to get to the realization that, everybody loves to be sold. We might not admit it, but people like to be sold. And if you go in and you're comfortable in that atmosphere, you can really have some success in really any avenue, but certainly it's really applicable to real estate and dealing with sellers and, creating that art of negotiation, things like that.
Yeah, so let's talk about, you mentioned the rental thing, and I'm at a point now, I've been making some pretty decent money wholesaling, rehabbing, and flipping a lot of properties, and I have this nagging fear in the back of my mind, Josh. One of the other gentlemen in our market who wrote, what did he write? Addicted to Real Estate, I believe was, Phil Falcone.
Yeah.
Phil pulled me to the side and he says, we were talking together and I was mentioning that, it was wholesaling and flipping properties, and he's like, you gotta buy rentals. You're eating your portfolio, Dan. And I'm like, so I got this like ghost of Phil in the back of my mind. It's like constantly like, oh God, I got to get myself some rentals. But, so let's talk about, your transition. I want to know, you started building the rentals. You weren't making any money. Let's talk about what you did. Did you transition out of the rentals? Did you come up with systems? I mean, how did you deal with the problem of the rental portfolio early on, Josh?
Well, okay, so I'm going to do something that you're probably going to hate, is I'm going to not answer your question immediately, but I'm going to get there. And that is this. One really important thing to keep in mind is that buying rentals and having rental properties, it's only one small part of a real estate investment portfolio. So, there are a lot of people out there that they buy for cash flow. They buy rentals for cash flow, or, they buy them for long-term appreciation. I kind of look at my rentals as little piggy banks that somebody else is filling up. I want to go in there and I do extensive renovations so that there's no, catastrophic repairs that are going to come up even for the next 10 years. And so then I put tenants in there and they just pay down the mortgage, and I'm not taking any of the cash flow out of it. It's just going right back in to pay down the principal, so that in 10 years or 12 years, I've got these properties that are, they're free and clear, and somebody else paid them off. And now, boom, there's an extra $100,000 or an extra $200,000, and if I can buy a rental property once a month or twice a year even, now I'm making an extra $100,000 or $200,000 or $1 million a year from money that somebody else invested. Okay, so that's my idea. Now, to your question directly, the frustration that we ran into was that if you do it wrong and you manage the properties yourself, in the beginning, you are definitely going to be you're going to get to the point where you do not have enough time to deal with all of the headaches that come with managing properties. And so, at least for me, I was overwhelmed and kind of got overloaded to the point where I just wanted to push all the responsibility off to a property manager. And take it from me, that's a bad thing to do. You got to understand the whole property management process. If you are just getting into investing, don't go out and buy a 100-unit apartment building. Go out and buy one rental and see what it's like collecting rent, and see what it's like when a tenant calls and they don't want to pay you your rent because there's the faucet in the bathroom is broken, even though they broke it. Things like this are going to come up. And once you get an idea of what it's like to be a landlord, now you can go out and find a good property manager. And so on my end, we were buying these properties, and we were buying, they were cheap properties and they weren't in good areas. And we were doing minor repairs just to get them rentable. And in the beginning, it seemed like a really good strategy, but very quickly it became a little bit overwhelming, right? Because now instead of 2 properties, you've got 30. Instead of 2 tenants, you have 30 tenants. And if there's one problem, there's 30 problems. And so it very quickly got a little overwhelming. And that's where, after we went through and interviewed different property managers, put part of our portfolio with them, and saw that we weren't really happy with the results, we kind of took a step back and said, okay, this is the process of what we need to do to be successful. And we implemented some really specific things with our tenants, like every tenant gets an invoice every month. And they get an invoice just like they get an invoice for, a credit card bill or a cell phone bill or mortgage payment. Comes in the mail, and it's due on the 1st. We implemented a pretty specific collection process where, in Philadelphia, and statewide, there's a 5-day grace period. So all of our rents are due on the 1st. On the last day of the previous month, we have a robocall that goes out and just says, hey, this is a reminder. This is Atlas Property Management calling. Your rent's due tomorrow. Make sure you get it in. We do the same thing on the 5th, which is the last day of the grace period, letting people know that there's going to be a late fee assessed if they don't pay their rent on time. And then between the 5th and the 10th, they get barraged with phone calls and emails and things to collect. And this goes on all the way up to the 14th of the month, to the point where if we don't have their rent by the 14th, they get a big eviction, notice of intent to evict sticker on their front door. It is amazing what an impact things like that, and having a process like that really has on your collection rates. I mean, we were able to go from sporadic and certainly inconsistent collections to over a 95% collection rate for our occupied properties. So it's process is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. I have a few things I want to talk about there before we go on. One of the things, since it's fresh, I'll start with this. You're invoicing the tenants, it's due on the 1st. You got the robocall on the 1st and the 5th. On the 5th, if somebody's rent has been paid, are they still receiving another call on the 5th, or is it kind of like weeding out as each person pays? They're obviously taken off of the system?
That's exactly right. It weeds out. And we have we use a third-party software called Propertyware. There are several others on the market that are really good and very, in varying degrees of functionality. We like Propertyware. We've implemented it into our system. But with that, you're able to pull down a list of tenants and contact phone numbers for each stage. And it literally takes maybe 5 minutes for each stage of the robocalls. And, at this point, it's not even something that I have to touch or my partner has to touch. We have a resident affairs manager that's his job. And so, on certain days of the month, he does what needs to be done and the calls go out. And that's really setting up those processes and then being able to implement them through other people has really been a liberating experience.
This is cool because it seems to me like you bought these rental properties, then all the horror stories began to happen. So you had this problem that you identified, and then out of the problem grew the Atlas Property Management. I mean, am I correct with that assumption?
That's exactly right. And what we kind of determined is that we had an idea that we could do this better. We weren't happy with our options from other managers. And so it was the kind of thing where we either grow a company around it so that it can be a profit center, or we sell all the rentals. Because it just, for me, I looked at it like, let's face it, if it's going to take all of your time and it's only 10 or 15% of your income, that's not a very good situation. But if we are able to bring other people's, bring other people on and manage their investments as well, now it allows us to hire people to, implement our process. And that's kind of what happened. We grew pretty quickly, and especially in the last year, we've not doubled in size, but right now we manage about 650 units. And, it's been a successful part of our real estate investing portfolio of businesses, I guess.
So 650 units. At what point, does a property manager break even when you guys, I assume you're at break even or profitable right now?
Yeah, we are. And I got to chuckle because when Ian and I first started with this, the very first, we swore that once we got to 100 units, that was the profitability mark. 100 units, we're going to make money. And then we hit 100, and it was like, well, maybe it's 200, and then maybe it's 300. And what we've really found in the market is like 150 units is the point where it's kind of the make or break for any property management company. So between that 150 and probably 300 mark, it becomes a 1-to-1 ratio. So it's like every time I take on one more unit, it costs me the same in income to grow because I have to grow between that 150 and 300 mark. So, there's money to be made in there, but there's not a lot in that sweet spot, I guess. I mean, it's the number where a lot of property managers end up going out of business, or they grow to be 10,000 units, and if they're able to get through that transition period, they can be really successful. But if they're not, it could be a real problem.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
So yeah, that's absolutely on point. I have another question, but first I want to touch on this before I forget. There's an investment philosophical approach that I believe I heard you speak about, and that was that you are paying down the rentals pretty much with all of the rental income right now. Did I hear that correctly?
That's right, and there's an asterisk there. The first thing, I'm a firm believer in providing good housing for good people. And whether you're buying properties in the worst area of North Philly or if you're in, Center City, you've got good qualified people that can rent your property. Even the worst neighborhoods, there are people that they might not pay any other bills, but they pay their rent. So I want to attract those type of people to my rentals. So when we're buying properties, we're anticipating doing major renovations. I mean, we make sure that the roofs are new, heating system is brand new, put in new kitchens and new bathrooms, do some nice cosmetic improvements, and really just have a functional house where my tenants, they don't have to worry about anything but living there. That's it. Just go enjoy your life. You come home, you're not going to come home and have a flooded, an overflowing toilet that's flooded the living room. So that's the first key, is budgeting for those repairs when I buy it. Second of all, I'm putting aside a 10% reserve. So I have anywhere from like $2,500 to $5,000 put aside per property so that if anything happens, I'm not reaching in my pocket and, I've got to make a decision. Well, do I have the money to evict these people this month because they didn't pay rent? It's done. Or, there's a burst pipe in the middle of wintertime that floods, the kitchen. And for one reason or another, I don't have the insurance money in my hand to get the thing taken care of. Well, shoot, that tenant's got to still live in the house, so I got to go in there and do the repairs. The money's right there. And so, that reserve is a big deal. But once the reserve is set, all of the rest of the money goes to paying down the principal on that property. My goal is to get it to zero owed on that property as quickly as possible.
Interesting. How many rentals do you own today, Josh? It
varies, but somewhere in the 30s. I mean, there's constantly, with the turnkey business, we have properties that we're buying as, that we buy and renovate and rent, that we have investors that are buying from us. So it varies from month to month, but somewhere between 35 and 40 at any given time.
Are you hanging on to any of those yourself, or is this just your inventory on the shelf of rentals?
No.
Turnkey?
Most of them I keep, but let's say 3 to 5 are inventory. I mean, we don't keep much inventory with turnkey, but it's part of the process, and with the rentals that are out there that I'm holding on to, sometimes I have investors that they come in and, hey, it's time to sell. So, they'll go out the door. And then there's other times where I see properties that long term or even in the midterm, it's really an advantageous buy and hold. And so, we'll pick up another rental. But yeah, I mean, it varies from month to month, but usually we're somewhere in the mid 30 to 40 range.
Nice. So in case anybody's listening in and they don't know what turnkey rental's all about, let's switch gears a little bit and we could talk about what that is and kind of the whole process, how you got started with that.
Sure. First, what it is. A turnkey property, it's the idea that you're walking into an investment just like you would walk into a mutual fund or invest in a mutual fund. You can invest in a turnkey property. You're buying an asset, and that's all it is. You're not, or you're investing in real estate instead of being a real estate investor. It's like when we provide these for our investors, we'll go out and source discounted properties. Basically, they're wholesale deals. Then we go in and do comprehensive repairs on the property, put a tenant in the house, and manage the property. And the investor comes up with the capital. Usually they're going to see anywhere from, 12 to 25% on their money, depending on the way the investment is placed, whether it's financed or not. But the idea is the typical client is somebody that they don't really have the time to be a landlord. They don't really have the time to necessarily even go out and become a student of real estate investing. This is something that they want to add as part of their portfolio because real estate in the short term and long term, it's a good investment. And they're just looking for that return. So, next question, how do we get involved in this? This is a really interesting story, and I got to say, it's got to be something to do with fate. About 2.5 years ago, we had this guy that just showed up at our office, and he says, look, I'm from Israel, pilot, come to the U.S. pretty frequently, and he said, I have a bunch of properties in Florida. The market's changed in Florida quite a bit, and, I'm looking at Philadelphia as a possible investment. He had already bought 2 properties in Philly from some other turnkey providers, and he was looking for somebody else. Said, do you have any properties? I mean, it was pretty random. So, I gave him a list of properties, and I kind of thought, this guy's going to waste my time. Next thing you know, he wires a deposit to the title company.
Nice.
This overseas wires it to the title company, sends back the contract, and that's where we started. We started with a duplex. And then, he bought another one, and another one, and another one. And about a year in, he bought something like 18 properties from me, and he was bringing his friends and family to invest. And that's when, I looked around and said, you know what, this looks like there's a market for this, And so originally our target was to work with overseas investors because it seemed like a pretty good fit. I had some experience with it. But the more I got into the industry, the more I started researching, the more I found that there's an awful lot of people, in Philadelphia that would love to invest in Philadelphia real estate, but don't have the first idea of where to get started. And so, more and more of our clients are coming from areas that, they're closer to home. A lot of people are coming from New York, DC, even Philadelphia and the suburbs. They're looking for good cash flow returns, good cash on cash returns on their money. And U.S. citizens, with the interest rates where they are now, and the banks are a lot more open to lending. Some of the returns that some of our investors are getting on these properties, it's in the high 20s and low 30% as a cash on cash return. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Nice. It's kind of a serendipitous or symbiotic relationship. So if we look at, you as a person, a business person, as an investor, Josh, you have, experience wholesaling, so you figured out how to buy properties cheap enough where another investor steps in, gives you 5, 10, or even 30,000 like you made on the first one to step into your shoes that you negotiated with the seller. So you figured out how to buy properties right early on. Obviously, it's one of the keys to success. Then you started buying and doing like mild renovations into the rentals. And then, along the way, you learned that it was better to give them a little higher quality renovation as opposed to, and I know we're probably not talking marble tile and, granite kitchens, or maybe we are, depending on some of the neighborhoods.
And it depends on the neighborhood, but generally speaking, you're right. Generally speaking, no.
So you're renovating the properties, you gain this experience renovating the properties. I'm just trying to walk people through the path that you took. Then you had this problem come up. It wasn't like you set out and said, I'm going to do property management, turnkey rentals. You kind of started managing your own rentals better and then decided that you'd like to have someone step in, needed an economy of scale. So you start coming up with the systems and putting people in place so that you're no longer involved in the day-to-day management of your own rentals or the rentals of everybody else. But it's an effective system that was powerful and efficient enough that you were happy having, your own company, as it were, managing your own rentals, which was a high barrier or a high expectation that you had set, which no other property managers could seem to fill in the beginning for your career. And then you're now able to kind of leverage all of those skills and those experiences by now putting in the turnkey rental. To me, it sounds like the turnkey rentals just aren't possible without, the highest and best quality and most efficient property management company. Am I kind of describing this complex system that is, your investment career at this point, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. You're making me feel like a rock star here. I really appreciate that, Dan. I'm going to get you to write my bio, But,
nice.
It was, in retrospect, looking back on it, it's been a really exciting, several years. Never at one point did I look at this and say, wow, look what I built. It's always been step by step. You sometimes, what's the saying? You can't see the forest for the trees. I think sometimes investors, especially beginners, they look at this and they say, what you just described, it sounds like this huge feat, but the truth is it was just getting up and working every day, trying to do the best I could with the resources. And before you know it, you work every day at it and great things happen. It's just plugging away.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool because you and I, we've danced around doing a few deals together, but some of the people that I've had on the call are literally like day-to-day partners of mine, so I kind of know the inner workings, but it's been cool getting to like hear and understand the inner workings of, your companies and your investment career up to this point just on this call, just so that everybody knows, the kind of the background between you and I so far.
Yeah.
Back to the turnkey rentals though. Let's talk about where you're getting, and you don't have to answer the question in case someone's listening, but where do you get the inventory for,
that's a great question
out there?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. All right. So Philadelphia right now is a really unique place, and it's not exclusive by any means. There's all kinds of markets around the country that you can get good cash flow, but I think Philadelphia is in a unique position right now because you have a ton of industry that's headed here, whether it's from the Sunoco pipeline, coming in from Western Pennsylvania, bringing all 75% of the energy usage in the country coming right through Philadelphia. Whether it's that or you've got every time I open the paper, I'm reading about another company that's relocating to Philadelphia, whether they're relocating from, across the river in Kansas or from Delaware or, from halfway across the country. There's more and more industry coming to Philly. So to answer your question, where am I getting the inventory? Because there's so much opportunity, I think there's a ton of potential great deals all over the city in every neighborhood. One thing that is different about our turnkey properties and our rentals than most other companies, we have the benefit of having over 4,000 leases in our company for the last, 5 years. Because of that, I have real data on real tenants in specific neighborhoods, zip codes, sub neighborhoods, things like that, where I can say, okay, basically what our model is that we're looking for properties that have after repair values between $85,000 and $125,000. What that gives me is an area that has some home ownership, it has some tenants, and it's got some pretty consistent values. There's not a huge jump when the market goes up, there's not a huge drop, and there's also areas where I can get discounts, significant discounts. Within those neighborhoods, I have like 14 neighborhoods that fit that criteria. But within those neighborhoods, what we look for in addition is we look for areas that have lower than average crime rates and that have success historically with these tenants. If I've got a neighborhood that I realize, hey, every time somebody moves out, they have this huge unpaid balance or we have to do an eviction, we just got rid of those neighborhoods. And so instead of looking for this inventory, I actually had to shrink it down to some very specific neighborhoods and areas. And, to find those deals, we do a ton of direct mail. We have a really good internet presence. I work with a lot of local wholesalers, source properties. And we've got a number of different outlets. Obviously the MLS is always there. So we're making offers there, but it's not as if I'm doing a ton of volume. On the on the turnkey end, we do anywhere from 3 to 5 projects a month. I'm buying right now about 1 flip a month, and as they come up, I'm buying a rental here or there. But it's not like we're doing dozens and dozens of deals on a monthly basis.
I am interested to know the exact numbers. For full disclosure, I'm sure you have nothing to hide. You have to make a profit. You're buying the property, you're putting how much construction in, how much profit, and then what's the ARV like compared to what, somebody's going to have to pay. It's still going to be getting like a slight discount from the $125,000 ARV, or are you expecting a full retail value? Let's talk about the exact numbers of the deal, Josh. That's
great. Okay, so let's use the $85,000 number because this is going to be the easiest to track, okay? There's 2 ways that we're evaluating the after repair values here. Number 1 is based on actual sales in the neighborhood. Retail sales on the MLS in the last 6 months, same properties, The other is cash flow. So if we've got a property that, maybe the ARV is $8,000, but I can't get more than $600 a month in rent, that's out. every property that we sell to an investor comes with at least $20,000 in equity based on the ARV. So that $85,000 property, the numbers look like this. We're contracting the property at about $25,000 and we're selling it for $35,000. Okay. And then we're going to put about $30,000 into the renovations. That's going to include a roof, windows, heating system, if there's any knob and tube in the property that's the electrical, we replace that with, new wiring throughout. We're testing all the water lines, supply and waste lines, making sure they work properly. New kitchens, new bathrooms, we get rid of any moving parts. So there's no ceiling fans, there's no dishwashers. I don't even provide, we don't do a washer dryer in the unit. I don't even provide a refrigerator for the tenants. They provide that themselves. But what we do provide are easy access to a washer dryer hookup. That means on the first floor of the property, there's a washer dryer hookup off like a bump out kitchen, or if there's no space to do that, maybe we'll put it on the second floor where the bedrooms are. Basically, it's just ease of use for the tenant. We also, if the hardwood floors are in good shape, we'll refinish those. We put in a new kitchen with tile floors, hardwood cabinets that are either cherry or a cinnamon finish, really nice laminate countertops. In the bathrooms, we do all tile bathrooms with accent tiles. I mean, the places look really nice. And in some of the areas, they're as nice as anything that's on the market for retail. So, the houses are in excellent shape so that when the tenants move in, there's low or no maintenance, and that's really the focus. So, for $65,000, the property is going to appraise for at least $85,000 up to, how appraisers go down. It could be $85,000 to $105,000, but let's say $85,000. So they've got $20,000 in equity on day one. And then on a cash-on-cash return basis, if they're buying this cash, they're going to see anywhere from 10 to 15% return on investment. With the refinance factor, they're going to be seeing anywhere from 22 to 30% return on investment.
So do you have any of your clients who are buying these properties with cash and able to refinance and get all of the cash, or put an equity line on and get all of the cash out if they can bump that appraisal up? I mean, how to build a big portfolio is buy it cash, refinance, get the cash out, buy another property. I mean, that's kind of like, the holy grail to a big portfolio. Can that be done with your turnkey rentals, Josh, on some of these?
I am really hesitant to encourage that, to be honest. I have seen a lot of the factors that we're discussing here. I said earlier that we chose the areas we chose for this turnkey investments based on our leases. But when we built it, or when we started the management company, we found some really interesting things. We had a lot of people that would come to us to manage their properties, and because of our timing in the market, it was just after the crash in 2008. Banks weren't really lending. There was a ton of inventory in the market and really a ton of opportunities for the right investors. And we saw this dichotomy in the marketplace. Half of the people that came to us that wanted us to manage their properties, they were ballers. They saw the opportunity. They were buying everything they could. They were building these massive portfolios. And then on the flip side, you had the people that were coming to us just looking for a salvation for their portfolios, hoping that we could salvage these beat up portfolios. And so one thing that we noticed is that both sides of the market, they both had these commonalities. The people that were having really huge problems in the market, they were over leveraged. They didn't improve their properties. They bought them, spit polished them, and threw a tenant in there. On the flip side, the guys that were doing really well, they had renovated properties and they had no maintenance on them. They had, they were buying at these huge discounts, and they were refining some money out, but there was always equity there. And so then when you ask about refining all the money out, here's what I always recommend to our investors. I recommend, if you're going to leverage, which is a great thing, leveraging 75% of the money that you have into the property. So let's say you have the $65,000 into this investment that we were talking about as an example. You can pull out 3/4 of that, and excuse me, my math is not great, but what is that? 65,000. I mean, they're pulling out $49,000 there. So let's say you have 16,000 tied up in the property, but you're getting 20% on your money. 5 years, you got all that money back, and you're not in a danger zone.
Can we talk about the danger zone and why you're saying to go that only 75%? I mean, what was the benefit? What happens if shit hits the fan? Let's talk about the nightmare scenario of why we should only take 75% back out, Josh.
Well, I don't know that there's a 100% tried and true. I don't even know that I can stand here and tell you that, that there's a reason behind that 75%, except that that's the number that came up when we analyzed the data. The people that were consistently successful, they were leveraged on the properties, but they weren't pulling out more than 75% of their money. And so, in this example, I mean, you've got $36,000 in equity. That's the $20,000 original, $20,000 difference that they gain in instant equity plus that $16,000 in money that's actually in the property. But 36 on 85, I mean, there's 40% equity in the property. So even if we have another catastrophe like we did, in 2008, and properties are losing 30 and 40%, you're still not underwater. You're still fine. I mean, that's a really strong position to be in. Plus, your cash flow, you end up having pretty darn good cash flow with those numbers as well.
Nice. You talked about, let me go back here in my notes.
I know I'm all over the place, Dan.
No, this is great. I mean, I got, pages and pages. I love doing these podcasts. I get so many notes, so many great ideas and insights from different perspectives on the business. So this is cool. So we talk about 12 or 20% return on cash. Are you also considering the 10% reserve number the same way you did for your own rentals when you're calculating these return on investments, Josh?
Well, no, I'm not. I mean, we take into consideration real numbers when looking at the analysis. Like we're looking at a vacancy rate that is proportional to what we see in our management portfolio. We're looking at rental licenses on an annual basis. We're looking at utility costs, leasing fees, obviously taxes and insurance. Also looking at the cost of management and an estimated cost of ongoing maintenance. All of our properties, they come with a 1-year maintenance-free warranty, but things are going to happen as time goes on. These things, if anytime you have moving parts, you have people living in properties, things are going to need to be fixed up. So, on an ongoing basis, there's that 5% maintenance reserve, let's say, but what we don't take into consideration when we're looking at these analyses are appreciation, because I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like. We don't look at the tax incentives that can come with it. We don't look at the equity that's built over time, where as the tenant pays down the principal on the loan. So these are some additional incentives. As far as the reserves go, that's something that I always encourage our owners to do. I tell them up front, it's probably a good idea to put away 10% of everything that's coming in, up to let's say $5,000 till that's set aside. And, just to make sure that your investment continues to return the way you want it to. But, that's not built in now.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the ideal client a little bit, because we have, in my experience just out there, I don't have a ton of experience with a lot of landlords other than, speaking with guys like yourself.
Sure.
Is there a certain number or a certain pathway? I'm trying to figure out how I want to address the question. So you have an investor who's buying property and they're just getting started. Should they buy 1, 2, 3, collect some rents just to get a feel for and an appetite for the business if they're more of an entrepreneurial investor like you and me, and then consider turning over to a property management company like yourself? Or would you say straight from the rip, buy that first property if you're planning on buying more, buy that property, come see me, and let's talk management? What would be like your suggestion for somebody who's kind of on the early end of the...
It depends on what the objective is. It really does. If you're somebody like you and I, and somebody that's looking around and saying, you know what, I want to be a full-time investor, I'm just not there yet. I would definitely say buy one rental, manage it yourself, find a tenant, make all the mistakes yourself, and so that there's no one that you can point at and say, oh, this is your fault. Obviously, you got to do your homework and things like that. But it's important to understand the kind of conflicts and frustrations that are going to come from owning rental property. If you don't understand that, you run into situations where you're going to constantly have conflict with your property manager, no matter who they are. We've had clients over the years that they want to hold us responsible when a tenant moves in and does some damage to a property, or, they don't pay their rent. And yet they don't want to be responsible to make the repairs that are necessary on the property, or, some of the other things that go along with being a landlord. And so, it's something new. It's like anything else, Dan. When you're first getting started, you need to get your hands dirty. You need to feel your way through the process. And after you have an idea of what to expect, and you at least have something to gauge performance against. If you were collecting rents 99% of the time, and all of a sudden you hand it over to a property manager and they're getting, one rent out of 10, you got a problem with the manager, you know what I mean? But if you don't have the information, you don't have the knowledge base to go off of, you really don't know. Now, on the flip side of this, there are plenty of people. I mean, my turnkey clients specifically are a great example. There are plenty of people out there that they don't want to be real estate investors. They want to invest in real estate, but they don't want to be investors. They don't want to be active. They don't want to be involved in the day-to-day. And that's fine. If that's the case, then, certainly it makes a lot of sense to go and search for a competent property manager, somebody that, you feel comfortable with. And specifically, I would go and look for referrals from other investors. Look at Ring or other networking groups, talk to people, find out who the landlords in the group are using for property management. Get that information, and then, you take the leap.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same advice probably for finding contractors, which would take me to the next point. Property maintenance.
Oh, my.
Repairs.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with that, right? So let's talk about that process of how you have to have a process. If you're managing 600 plus properties, there's got to be some sort of strategy for keeping costs down on repairs and maintenance to help benefit your clients, right, Josh?
Well, of course. And, I have gone through this in a couple different derivations. When we first were getting into the management end of things, because I had a background in construction, even though I wasn't swinging a hammer, I was charged with running our maintenance. And at first, I figured, you know what, we'll run this in-house. We'll do, we'll use all contractor employees. That'll be the best way to keep our costs down, for us to make a little profit as we go along, but really to keep the cost down for our clients. Great. So that's where we started. And what we found was it cost us so much money that we were basically hemorrhaging in our maintenance department because of the travel costs between jobs. Our next step was to reach out and find a small handful of competent subcontractors. And that's really where we found a lot of success, is finding people that, because of the volume that we were doing, we were able to build a loyalty. And, what we had set up is with our owners, we have the authorization to go and we can spend up to $350 on a repair of a property without contacting them beforehand, before doing the work. And so this gives our contractors a lot of leeway to go out, look at the property, say, okay, this is what needs to happen. And 90% of all the repairs are going to fall well below that $350 threshold. And the ones that don't, we have clear communication from the contractor while they're at the job site that goes to our construction manager, who reaches out to the owner, communicates, this is what needs to happen. This is about the cost that it's going to be. I need your authorization to do the work. We send a payment request and they send in the payment. And all of this happens within a 30-minute process, and boom, there you go. The work can get started. So it has been an interesting process. One thing that I've learned over the years is that contractors are great until they're not. Even the best contractor goes lame from time to time, and you just have to be prepared for that. I just had an instance where I had to fire a contractor last week, a guy that I've known for years. Literally since I got started in the business. He billed me for things that weren't done, and so
wow.
I had to terminate the relationship. And it stinks, but these things happen. You just got to be vigilant. Just keep going.
Yeah, you're right about that. What's the number one repair that you see popping up throughout the entire portfolio?
Wow, you caught me off guard there. Yeah, I think there's two that jump out in my mind. The first is, they're both plumbing related. The first is the leak that you see in almost every row home in Philadelphia, right underneath the bathroom from the tub drain. I can't tell you. It's been very infrequent for me to walk into a house, especially one that I'm thinking about buying, and not see that stain on the ceiling or see a patch there. So that's pretty frequent. I think that's a design flaw when the homes are built. The second is pretty much in the nature of the age of the properties in Philly, and that's the drain line. Drain lines backing up and getting clogged. That's probably the second most prevalent. Both of them are really minor, and they're easy fixes. Cost is $100 or $150 to get done, and it can be done in an afternoon. So nothing major, but they are the things that tend to keep popping up.
Got it. Do you charge back the tenant for the drain clogs, or put that on them in any way, shape, or form, or have the process for determining whether?
Sure. It really depends on what the cause is. If we have conversations with all of our subcontractors to let them know that if there's an issue with the property, it seems not to be regular wear and tear, that we need to know about it. And so they'll take pictures and submit them. In fact, all of our contractors are required with any bills that they submit to upload pictures of the completed work, because we've had issues in the past. As I mentioned before, we've had issues with contractors doing some things that are a little shady, billing for things that aren't done. And so we require anything like that to be uploaded into our system, and then we share it with the owners when that's complete.
Nice. I mean, it sounds like you have a stellar system. I mean, what if you had what if you could talk to an investor, what if you could talk to yourself when you had the 30 properties? I mean, what would be your message, and how would you want to convince yourself to go with the property management, before you had made that decision? I mean, what kind of things? So if someone's listening and they have 30, 40, 50 properties, and maybe they're spending, 75% of their life collecting rent, invoicing, doing minor repairs, running all over creation, as opposed to either finding something with a higher value to do with their time, sit back and relax a little bit, or, what would you say to that guy, Josh?
I'd say that you got to go into that. Do your homework. That's the biggest thing. Do your homework. Talk to the people that are going to be managing your property. The ideal situation is to find someone that is smaller than 300, where, they're in that growth stage where they're still immersed in the business and have a very hands-on approach to the management, or somebody that has gone through that process and is stabilized. Where I see people getting a lot of where I see a lot of frustration from clients that are coming to us for management is when they are leaving a company that was in transition. That you've got the owner of the management company who, when they first started managing the properties, they were really hands-on. They were talking to them every day. We collected this rent. Everything's cool. Just want to let you know what's going on in the process. And then, they start growing, and they've got to be that property management company owner has got to be more hands-on in the growth aspect of the business, while still trying to hold on to, some of the roles that he's played, dealing with owners and dealing with tenants and things like that, there's really a lot of conflicts that arise. So, I would say, really you should go for it. Look for a management company that you're comfortable with, to contact somebody that is going to be a tenant to your properties, that manages the type of properties that you own specifically. That's a big one. Is very familiar with the areas that you're investing in, and then just give them a try. Send them 3 or 4 properties, see how it works out. And if it doesn't work out, if you've got 30 or 40 properties, you're not getting killed. And on the flip side, if it does work out, holy cow, think about the time that you're going to save, not having to, run around and collect rents and the frustration of, 4 a.m. phone calls and, there's a leak or something like that going on in the property.
What type of cost structures? Is there a discount if a guy's got 40, 50 properties or 30 properties compared to a guy that's bringing one? I mean, what should somebody expect to pay for property management?
That's a great question. A lot of it is going to depend on the type of services that are offered, and a lot of it is going to be determined by the type of property that is being managed. So I would much rather have a property in a really nice suburban area that the rents are $2,000 a month, and charge that person a flat rate of $100 a month or whatever it might be, which turns out to be, 5%, as opposed to charging 12 or 15% or a flat rate of $200 a month for a Section 8 property in a bad neighborhood in Philly, because the cost of management is so much higher, and it's so much more of a drain on the resources in our office to manage that PHA funded rental property, as opposed to the nice conservative, really easy to deal with a suburban property that's a little higher rent, where the rent's always paid on time. The tenant, if they have a problem, they probably take care of it themselves. And, if they get a phone call, you go out and take care of it, and it's no big deal. It's just that it's really going to vary. When we started, we were at 9% of collected rents. That changed as we grew. We, for a while, were a little bit higher because we were in areas that were a little bit more consuming when it came to the management of the properties. We were in some pretty rough neighborhoods and did well there, but it was consumed our resources. And now as we've grown, we've got a couple clients that have 50, 60, 70 units, and we charge them 6%. And we have others that have a small handful of more rough properties that are more in the range of 10 or 12%. So, it really is going to depend on the type of property. That is going to have a huge impact.
So the type of property and the volume, and it sounds like it's somewhat negotiable then, right? It's kind of not really set in stone.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the industry average, I think, is about 6%, but that's so arbitrary because what ends up happening is there's all kinds of, rinky-dink fees that go with a lot of properties as well, where it's, you think you're paying 6%, but at the end of the day, you end up paying about 18% of the collected rents, because it's 50% of late fees. There's a fee to pay your rent online. There's a fee to get a statement. There's a fee to get this, a fee to get that, and it all adds up. That's I'll give you a perfect example. There's a company that I'm not going to mention them. They're one of our competitors, and it's one of the companies that we first hired to manage our properties. That every time, it seems like every month, we $400, $500, $600 in maintenance costs. And
wow.
Our properties were in good shape. They were in decent shape, And what we found out is the management fees, they didn't even cover their costs. They made money on their construction. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's transparent and everybody understands what's going on there. But it changed the nature of our investment in those properties because, even at the 6%, or I'd rather pay 12%, management fees and just leave me alone with the maintenance.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
So, I mean, it's just read the contract. Read the contract. Make sure that you are aware of everything that's being charged, and are aware if there's any conflicts. If we have our own construction company, that doesn't mean that they necessarily are the ones that are doing all the repairs. But when we use our construction company, we fully disclose, hey, this is, our guys are doing the work. Of course, we're making a profit on it, and there's no issue. But if there's nothing disclosed and you find out that, there's a 40% markup on every repair that's done, that can be a little bit challenging from time to time,
Yeah, I hear that. Well, cool. We're getting to the top of the hour here, Josh. So I have a couple of questions here that we'll wind down. And the first will be, do you have any book recommendations, anything recent, anything, at the start of your career that you think will be pertinent for anybody listening in?
This is one of my favorite subjects. I am a very avid reader. I don't sleep much, so I find myself reading a couple books a month.
Nice. One
of the best business books that I've read, it's a longtime favorite, is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. That was a real life changer for me. It's basically about how to, it's a textbook example on how to outsource your life and also how to identify the important things in your business so that you can just focus your time and effort on the stuff that's going to make you the most money. Let's see. Another good one that I read in the last year, it's called 0 to 1. 0 to 1, something like Notes on the Startup. It's by Peter Thiel, one of the PayPal co-founders. And that book is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, if you're starting a business, if you're just getting into real estate or just business thought, I mean, it's so insightful, and it's really about how to start from day one with the end in mind and how to be forward thinking, how to, one of the chapters is how to set yourself up for exponential growth. And they use, Dropbox as an example. And there's a couple other examples where, they build into the software the idea that you invite your friends to use the software. And before you know it, they grow from, this little company with a couple servers to, one of the biggest cloud storage companies in the world. And, it's just really, really interesting stuff. Right now, I just got this off Amazon the other day, is Breakthrough Advertising by Eugene Schwartz. It's all about copyrights, like learning how to write copy, essentially, and advertising and marketing and things like that. It's really good stuff. But yeah, those are three off the top of my head. I'll give you a top 10 if you want to keep going, but
that's pretty cool.
Right now,
it's funny. Yeah. It's one of my favorite topics also. I probably read, like yourself, 2-3 books a month. And there was a time that I didn't have that same hunger for knowledge that I have today. And a few years ago, I was frustrated, and I'm going to kind of share some of my personal story here. I was broke. The market changed. I was ill-equipped and ill-prepared mentally for what was going on. And, I was humbled, to say the least. I went from making good money, flipping houses and contracts and, to not making good money. And during that time, I picked up the Bible. And I remember reading the book of Proverbs, and I'd read that, almost on a daily basis. There's actually 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs, so it's very convenient to read one chapter per day and then repeat the process, which is something that I picked up from another gentleman who was told, if you want to become a millionaire within 5 years, get the book of Proverbs, read one chapter per day, and continue that process for 5 years straight. And not only do you read it, but you sit there with a notepad and you take notes on some of the insights that you got. And so I started doing that, and I got about, a few months in, and one of the things I had picked up from that was that wisdom is more important or more valuable than gold, diamonds, rubies, silver, etc. So basically a lot of the undercurrent and, overlying principles that I picked up during that book was to develop an insatiable hunger and respect for knowledge and wisdom. So to listen to podcasts like this, to read the books you suggested, to take notes as people on these calls are, giving, just like you've done today, Josh, of your valuable time and valuable experience. We're able to pick up a few of the insights that took you years of trial and error, of failing, of losing money along the way, I'm sure, to get these insights and these ideas that you've then been able to implement and grow into, the successful life in real estate that you've been able to achieve now. So, when I get to the topic of the books, I'm getting, very interesting. I've read, myself 0 to 1. I'm going to order Breakthrough Advertising as soon as we're done with this podcast. 4-hour work week.
Don't be shocked at the price point. It's a pretty in-demand book. Maybe I'll give it with it.
All right, yeah, we'll have to do that. But what price is knowledge worth? You take that information and you do one little thing with it, and what, $400 or $500? I've doubled my income, and doubled it again as a result of, taking that insatiable hunger for knowledge that I developed, reading the Bible a few years back, and it's just changed my life, multiple times over. And the funny thing is, when I ask that question, none of the highly successful individuals who come on this show ever say, yeah, I don't read, Dan. I don't know any books. That's never the answer.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Pretty interesting.
Yep.
And it's like, you're probably like me. Like I'm resisting every urge right now while we're on this, podcast to log into Amazon and buy that book immediately. I have a habit of doing that. I hear someone says, yeah, read this book. Bam, I get it. I don't, hesitate, I don't procrastinate, I don't debate or add it to some list or wish list. My night table's full of books, my bookshelf is obviously full of books, and it's just a great habit that I've been in to help change my life,
My wife curses me. My wife curses me because twice a year, she will literally walk in the house with 4 book boxes that are empty and say, "Okay, fill these up, and we're getting rid of them." Because the collection grows and grows and grows. It's crazy. But anyway,
so go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing. And one of my passions is training jiu-jitsu, and there's a saying at the gym that and it goes, drillers are killers. And, the idea is that when you drill the same activities over and over and over and over and over again, they become second nature. It's the same thing with reading. When you're sitting there and you're reading this book, it changes you. It embeds itself into your thoughts, into, your actions in a way that, with martial arts or physical activity, that repetitive action, it changes you as well. I mean, it's just, I don't know. That's one of those sayings that it doesn't fit exactly in this situation, but it has the same impact for me on the physical end as I feel like reading and continual education has, on the mental aspect.
Yeah, it really does. And the way I've been able to kind of stave off the books growing too big is I moved away from my home office or my, my company office in Philadelphia there, and like all the books are still on the shelf there, and I just started like a whole new collection out here in Chicago.
That's awesome. That's
perfect.
You know what? It gives you a reason to have to come back to Philly from time to time. It's like, oh yeah, I want to read that book again. There was something in there I got to resource.
Yeah, and the irony is, like, I've actually bought a few of the books a second time and began reading them and I said, wait a minute, I think I read this before. And I would finish it again a second time and get more out of it. So it's
that's
pretty
right.
cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So I have one more question before we wrap up, and I want you to answer it two ways. First, for the investor who's just getting started, and then second, for a seasoned investor. And that is, do you, Josh, have any final jewels of wisdom to share with our listeners?
Yeah. Okay. For the new investor, here's the jewel of wisdom. It's going to be that don't wait to get started. The best, certainly education is an important part of real estate investing, but I'll bet you, and Dan, I know that you've got a long list of people like this. You know people that when you first got started in real estate, they had already been involved in the game for years in the education side of the business. We've both done dozens, if not hundreds of transactions. And here we are years later, those same people, I'll bet you a good portion of them had never done a deal. The best way to get an education in real estate is to go out there and do it. Don't be frozen by, the fear of the unknown. There's never going to be the perfect investment. There's never going to be the perfect time. There's never going to be the perfect anything in life. If you want to be a real estate investor, go out and get involved in a real estate deal. Even if that means you are working for somebody else in the business, just to see what's going on and get your hands involved. Yeah, just go out and do it. That's for the new investor. For the more experienced investor, this is something that took me a while to really understand and get comfortable with. I come from a really blue-collar background, and I was always intimidated around people that had money. I mean, for the longest time. In fact, it intimidated me so much that I wouldn't surround myself with successful people intentionally because they made me uncomfortable. And it took me the longest time to realize that the people that I was surrounding myself with was limiting my success. And as soon as I changed my friends, and I'm not saying get rid of everybody in your life, but, as soon as I started hanging out and spending time with and people that were successful and really successful and were smarter than me, made more money than me, had more insights than me, all of a sudden I started realizing myself in that same environment. And now, my income increased, my rate of success increased. All of the things that I thought I couldn't do just kind of disappeared because everybody I knew was already doing them. And so that's my, what did you want to call it? The pearls of wisdom?
Final jewels of wisdom. Yeah.
Final jewels. There you go. Jewels of wisdom.
The REI diamonds.
That's right. That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, that's the two things that I would say. Number one, if you're a new investor, get at it. Just go and get involved. And if you are an experienced investor and you really are looking to take it to the next level, look at the people around you. Make sure you're surrounding yourselves with people that are better than you and, better than you, smarter than you, more successful than you. And before you know it, you'll be right there.
Nice. So how can people get more information about you, Josh, your companies, and I can include this information in the show notes?
Yeah, sure. There's two ways to get in touch with me. If you are looking for turnkey real estate investments or you're looking for wholesale properties, you can go to turnkeyphilly.com. That's turnkeyphilly.com. If you're interested in real estate coaching or mentorship, you can go to my education site. It's rei360.net. And there's a 30-day free trial there. You can check out some really good tools and trainings there. But Yeah, I mean, also, if you just want to talk about a real estate deal, if you got something that you got a question that you want to discuss, feel free to call my office. It's 267-507-7055, 267-507-7055. I feel like I'm leaving a message on an answering machine here, Dan.
No. Yeah, I guess in a sense you are. 267-507-7055.
You got it. You got it.
Cool. I'll make sure I include that in the show notes as well. Well, Josh, it's been a great episode here. I had a good time, got a ton of notes, ton of information here. I really appreciate you giving up your busy schedule so that you can, impart your wisdom here on our listeners and myself. Thank you for coming.
Dan, it was really a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I thank you for having me on the show. It's awesome stuff. I really had a good time today. Thanks a lot, man.
Cool. And thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamonds podcast, your source for real estate investment, Jewels of Wisdom. You can sign up to receive an email update every time a new weekly episode is published at www.reidiamonds.com. As a bonus for signing up, I'll send you my free report titled 7 Sources of Off-Market Deals. That website again is www.reidiamonds.com. Until next time, this is Dan Breslin, signing off.
Thanks for listening to the REI Diamond Interview. To receive the REI Diamonds newsletter and interview monthly, sign up now at www.reidiamonds.com.